Alright, be honest with me, do any of you recognize this man running down the finishing chute? I bet not many of you did, but by the end of this video, you sure will. Welcome to the fourth race of the Ironman Pro Series, Ironman 70.3 in Mallorca, where every second mattered as so many of the athletes on the start line are chasing that coveted first ever Ironman Pro Series title. And what a series it has been so far, and this race just made it even more epic. So let's get into it. This field was absolutely stacked on both the men's and the women's side. Strength of field score on the men's side over 90. There was $50,000 on offer in prize money here. 3 slots to the Ironman 70.3 World Champs in Taupo. And the big headline coming in was that Gustav Iden was back on a start list for the first time since last summer after dealing with injuries. How would he fare against such a strong field that included the likes of Yuri Kulin, who is on fire recently, as well as the likes of Jan Stratman after a brilliant second place at 70.3 Valencia. Matthias Margerier was there as well. He's another athlete in form, as well as so many other Europeans who are waiting to kick off their Pro Series and see if they can make a dent in Patrick Lange's lead at the top of the leaderboards. So diving into the swim, and as you can see, a few men were a little eager to get underway with a false start there. Didn't get penalized for it, and all 38 men eventually got going and started ripping the pace at the front of this race. It ended up being a super fast swim split with a lot of top swimmers in this race. At first they kind of spread out on the left side and the right side, but they all eventually came together, and from there it was pretty straightforward. There was one very large strung out front pack that included Mr. Gustav Iden himself at the back, hanging on right next to Patrick Lange, and at the very front it was being led out by Yannick Schofler of Germany with a brilliant third place at 70.3 Valencia not too long ago, and Mattia Tetarelli, the Italian, who was racing his third race of the Pro Series already and ever improving, so keep an eye out on him. Jan Stratman was there, the third place finisher of the 70.3 World Championships. He was in fourth coming out of the swim, and Matthias Margerier, Yuri Kulin right up there in 5th and 7th coming out of the water, having a fantastic start. 2 of the favorites as well. Gregory Barnaby, who's coming back from injury, he was also there. Paul Schuster, another dark horse in this race, as well as Matthias Pedersen, who had a brilliant race at Ironman South Africa not too long ago. But the big headline was that Gustav had made it and was in a prime position to take advantage of this bike course that really suited him. It was a long transition for these guys, about 3 minutes for them to run all the way to get their bags and get onto their bikes. A little bit of an error there, getting out of the wetsuit for one of the athletes, and a pretty packed area for this large group of athletes who came out of the swim together. It was Mattia Tetarelli who had a brilliant transition, got out and going first, followed by the likes of Jan Stratman, Matthias Margerier, Matthias Pedersen, and Yuri Kulin. And it was Matthias Pedersen who led this front group of 12 athletes out right away into the flat section of the course. Patrick Lange was not one of those who was able to join that group, and he quickly began losing time. This was not a group you wanted to miss out on. There was so much firepower, and the course was only going to get harder the longer it went on. But at least Patrick was able to continue riding and giving it his best effort on this course, whereas Gustav Iden reportedly suffered a mechanical, which would end his race. So not the best way for the Ironman World Champion to return to racing and kick off his Pro Series. But back to the front of the race, and Yuri Kulin, who impressed us in Singapore with his bike power, was showing it once more, and he moved to the front of the race by about 15 kilometers in, and then disaster struck for him as well. He received a blue card for a drafting penalty, and there would be several handed out at this race. It seemed like from the report of one athlete, Yannick Schofler, who also got a blue card, that whenever the referees were seeing a flashing red light that the athletes were in the 12-meter draft zone, they were getting handed a penalty immediately, and Yuri Kulin was one to suffer it and ended up pulling out of the race, which is terrible for him because he was clearly trying to pick up a 70.3 world slot here. He finished 6th there last year, but he's got a busy calendar, and it'll be hard for him now to squeeze in another race to his busy season. But back to the front of the race, and that gave the opportunity for Christian Hogenhout to move to the front and push the pace. He ended up getting over half a minute gap at one stage, but behind him, the likes of Jan Stratman, Mathies Marjorie, and Gregory Barnaby impressively were holding on, but there was also one other athlete in there, and his name was Nicholas Mann, and he was having an absolute flyer on the bike, and he was sticking with those guys, and nobody would have guessed it, because this 24-year-old is ranked pretty low in the PTO standings, but he proved that a number is just a number because he was having a day to remember, and what a course to be having a blinding day on. Just the most stunning views, beautiful climbing, and epic descents for these guys to enjoy. And speaking of descents, it was Mathies Marjorie who managed to make a break stick towards T2, breaking Stratman, Mann, Hogenhaug, and Barnaby. It looked like it was the decisive move. And heading out of T2, you would have guessed it was. He looked like he was absolutely flying, and this was going to be another impressive win for Mathies Marjorie. However, a lot of drama was about to unfold on the run. And that's because the group of four behind him were up for a battle. And those guys got going on the run together, and they would end up sticking together and battling together throughout most of it. And there was honestly so many lead changes between them that it's not worth me going through all of them. It was one of the best 70.3 run podium battles I've seen in a long time. And that's why I just love this sport, because you really don't know how it's going to unfold until the very last second of the race. Anything can happen at any moment, and that's what we saw here. So those guys came out of transition over a minute down, and it stayed that way for quite a while. But one athlete in T2 who was not so close to the front of the race, and that was Patrick Lange, the Pro Series leader. He was almost 12 minutes back after the bike. He said after the race that 3 races in 5 weeks was too many for him, and he's got to figure out why his 70.3 performances just don't match up with his Ironman results. But back to the front of the race, because the drama was just about to start. Because with about 6 kilometers to go, Mathies Marjorie began to fade, and fade badly. And it wasn't long before Jan Stratman, Nicholas Mann, and Gregory Barnaby had overtaken him. Christian Hogenhaug, unfortunately, his wheels had fallen off too, and he was fading. But he still had a chance to even catch Marjorie, which was absolutely gutting for him considering all the work he'd done to put himself in that position. So in the end, it was Barnaby, Stratman, and Mann in a battle over the last few kilometers to see who would take the first European Pro Series race, and it was the 24-year-old who shocked us all, taking the win by just 8 seconds over Jan Stratman, who is in his second sprint finish in not too long, considering he'd just been through one at Valencia. What a result for the young lad, who said he would have been stoked with a top 5 finish here. Clearly, he's put in a solid winter season training, and he is ready for the big leagues. He beat some serious competitors here, and he said he had to take some risks to do so. He said he was hoping his mother wasn't watching his descents on that bike course, but they paid off. The risk was worth it. And look at this result he's just grabbed himself. Jan will be happy with another brilliant second place at his second 70.3. And Gregory Barnaby, coming back from that injury, definitely a Pro Series contender. He'll be happy with that result, as well as knowing that he was one of those 4 men who all broke the course record that has lasted since 2014. These were some truly special performances. All in all, this men's race was probably my favorite so far. It had everything you could have asked, from penalties to mechanicals to bike breakaways to run battles. It was truly spectacular. And the women's race wasn't so bad either, so let's dive into it. All the talk leading into this one was about Emma Pallet-Brown and Laura Philipp, and rightly so, because Emma was technically the defending champion from 2022, while Laura Philipp had won the race back in 2016 and 2017. And they are a great pair to pit against each other because Emma and Laura swim about the same. Laura edges Emma a little bit on the bike, where Emma edges Laura a little bit on the run. So it was set to be the perfect showdown. And Emma had come off of a great result at Oceanside, while Laura would have hoped for a little bit more at her 70.3 opener in Valencia, coming 4th place there. But they would have to take on many other strong European women, the likes of Lena Meisner, who had actually finished ahead of Laura in Valencia, so she was going to be a good one to watch out for, alongside a couple of athletes making their debut for the season: Julie Emilo, Sif Bentix Madsen, Bianca Bogan, Rico Bogan's sister, and then also Swedish athlete Sara Svenks. So diving into the swim, and it was going to be all about how much time could the strong swimmers, the good front pack swimmers, get on the likes of Emma Pallant-Brown and Laura Philipp. And right away, it started off perfectly for them. It was 6 of them total in this breakaway, including Lena Meisner, Sif Bendix Madsen, and Julie Emilo, but they didn't open as much of a gap as they would have hoped. Laura and Emma were swimming quite well. Laura said it was a great swim for her. Emma said it was a little bit rough, but still wasn't that far back. And then they caught up even more time in that long transition, able to use their running strength. In fact, Emma had the fastest transition one out of the men's and the women's race, and they were pretty much less than a minute down, which is something they're probably not used to, and it would pay dividends right away on the bike. But it was Lena Meisner who led the way for that front group on the bike at first, and that's exactly who they would have wanted leading the way. She's a short course athlete who balances university studies somehow and picked up that second place performance in Valencia in her first ever 70.3. So I was expecting big things from her. But unsurprisingly, Laura Philipp pushed the pace for her and Emma, and they caught back up to that group within 15 kilometers, which was really quick for them to get to the front of this race. And actually, Laura after the race said she was really surprised by this. And they just kept pushing on after that and managed to separate themselves from that group pretty easily. And if that wasn't bad enough for that front group of women, a couple of them picked up penalties, just like what happened in the men's race. And one of those was Lena Meisner herself picking up a 5-minute drafting penalty. And eventually, like Yuri, caused her to not finish the race. And Stephanie Clutterbuck, shame for her, in her first pro race, picked up one as well. But she ended up finishing, but just probably not the result she would have hoped for. But that still left us with the dream battle we were hoping for between Emma and Laura at the front of the race. And Laura said her tactic was to try and break Emma pretty early on and get a gap, but Emma managed to hold on much longer than she expected. However, after that big climb, she did manage to lose Emma Pallant on the descent and picked up a 2.5-minute gap coming into transition 2. Now at this stage, that would have seemed like too much to me for Emma to catch up, although she did have the run course record here of 1:17:17, and Laura, as she showed in Valencia, is not quite at her peak, so anything was still possible. But Emma herself actually agreed with me, thinking that was too much of a gap coming into T2, and she didn't think she had a chance at the win. However, with Laura Philipp pushing so hard on the bike, en route, by the way, to the bike course record, which she ended up taking from Daniela Reeve, so massive accomplishment for her there. But she said she did feel it in her legs going out onto the run, and that's probably what helped out Emma Pallant-Brown here, who, despite saying she had a tough first lap, set out at a really fast pace and made up a lot of ground right from the beginning. And the gap was just over a minute by the 7K mark. She would eventually catch Laura in the final lap, and who knew if Laura had been saving just a little bit extra for when Emma would come, because she was obviously receiving splits that she was getting there. But it looked like that bike leg had taken just too much out of her, and she said she was missing just that extra gear she needed, clearly showing that it's still an early season race and she is missing that final piece that we know she has. But Emma, with her extra bit of race experience this year, was that much more sharp, and she won the race in the end by just 15 seconds, and she had to squeeze everything out of herself for this one. What a result this is for Emma, with extra significance that it was a pretty hot race there by the end of the run, and she's notoriously not done well recently in the heat, so this one will mean a little bit extra for her. And then Laura says she will take the momentum from this race into the next one. She'll be racing T100 San Francisco coming up in the beginning of June. And then Sara Svenks was the best of the rest, but finishing quite a bit down from these two other ladies. She said her swim disc didn't show up and her bike didn't show up, but she found her legs in T2 for the run and managed to pull off a good third place result for her. That is it for this race recap. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you become a member of the channel, you'll get access to these videos early. I hope you like them. Leave a comment down below What do you think? Who do you think is going to end up with this Pro Series title? And we'll see you for the next one after Chattanooga coming up.